All right, good morning. Welcome to Sportsnet Central. Well, thanks everybody for continuing to chat. I love tables, into tables, back to tables. We've got some more tables coming up. So I am really looking forward to this morning. The purpose of the morning is twofold. One is want to start sharing some stories about some other churches and communities that are already gathered around the good table, and also to leave some time for the community here to ask Elle some questions that you might have in advance of next week's vote. So kind of got things set up. I've got two of my favorite table stories from Scripture to share, and kind of those lead into some questions for Elle just to get the conversation going. And then out of that, we're going to open up the floor for a bit, and then after that, we will celebrate communion together. So I'm going to start. I should have made a slide so the pun was more obvious, but rather than introduce Elle, I thought I'd let her give her elevator pitch on both herself, introduce herself. I've known her for years. And
is he always that bad? Is that, yeah. May the Lord bless and keep him. Hi, my name is Elle. It's a privilege to be with you again. I was with you a couple of months ago, and so it's lovely to be back. My elevator pitch. I'm real terrible at this. I work a couple of jobs. So I work for an organization called The Good Table, and that's what I'm here representing today. I also have the privilege of working for another organization called the New Leaf Network, and we do a lot of work in the Canadian context as well. So I've been in ministry circles for a long time. I've known James for a long time. I know your other dear Pastor Brandy, and so it's such an honor to be with you and sharing these tables together today. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming down the road and making it here. And you have a voice left after screaming and cheering.
I do. I was very lucky to, when the tickets went on sale for the kind of general admission, standing only sections, the district drops, I was very lucky that I got 2 of those tickets and stood for 2 hours before the game, 3 hours after the gate opened, and then 2.5 hours for the game. But it was a beautiful game to stand for, game 1. So go Jays. I'm calling Jays in 7.
Okay,
Jays
all
in
right.
7.
Wow.
That's what I think.
Well,
6?
Okay, 6.
It's my kind of guy.
5? I'm going for 5. Yeah, it's not 4.
It's not 4.
It is.
They got to face that pitcher again, so I think it's 7. That's my thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing we're sitting then.
Yeah.
Sitting too.
Yep.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yep. Thanks for that.
No worries. Well, let's. I wanted to start with one of my favorite table stories. It's from the book of Acts. It's chapter 10. I'm going to read kind of from the beginning, or from 12 right through to 28. And when there's so much reading, I like to just leave that blank so you can close your eyes. I will try and speak slow and clear. And but if you do have your Bible on you, it is Acts chapter 10, starting verse 12. So at Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius. He was a centurion in what was known as the Italian regiment. He and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need, and he prayed to God regularly. One day, at about 3 p.m, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, "Cornelius." Cornelius stared at him in fear. "What is it, Lord?" he asked. The angel answered, "Your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa to bring back a man named Simon, who is called Peter. He is staying with Simon the tanner, whose house is by the sea." When the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier who was one of his attendants. He told them everything that had happened and sent them to Joppa. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat, and while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw heaven opened and something like a large sheet being let down to earth by its 4 corners. It contained all kinds of 4-footed animals, as well as reptiles and birds. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." "Surely not, Lord," Peter replied. "I've never eaten anything impure or unclean." The voice spoke to him a second time. "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This happened 3 times, and immediately the sheet was taken back to heaven. While Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was, and they stopped at the gate. They called out, asking if Simon, who was known as Peter, was staying there. And while Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Simon, 3 men are looking for you. Get up, go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them." Peter went down and said to the men, "I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come?" The men replied, "We have come from Cornelius the centurion. He is a righteous and God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to ask you to come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say." Then Peter invited the men into the house to be his guests. The next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the believers from Joppa went along. The following day, he arrived in Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together all his relatives and close friends. As Peter entered the house, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet in reverence. But Peter made him get up. "Stand up," he said. "I'm only a man myself." While talking with him, Peter went inside and found a large gathering of people. He said to them, "You are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean." And the rest of the chapter is great. Gets into the gospel, talks about Jesus. Big old house party, lots of great stuff flows out of that. There's baptism by the Spirit. There's let's get some water and do another baptism. But what I really love about this story is that this is an introduction of the good news being for all nations, for all people. God does not show favoritism. There are new invitations that are being made plain. So I wanted to come out of this story and ask Elle and talk about, obviously the Good Table's affirming stance has opened up the table to many Christians that have been looking for a table to sit around. But I've got a hunch there's a lot more people pulling up a seat as well. And so I thought I'd ask, where and how have you seen the table filling up with folks that have been typically, we're not used to sitting beside?
Yeah, that's a great question. I grew up in Pentecostal circles, so we love Acts 10. This is like, we love the book of Acts. So this is my jam. And my own personal reflections on those verses is that I'm grateful that God drags us along. I don't know if you've ever experienced that feeling that the Spirit continually crosses these lines, and that the miracle is often that we are being taken in this process. It's like we're being converted into the process as we adopt postures of listening and as repentance and openness to the Spirit that just continually kind of crosses all these lines. We make a box and it feels like the Spirit jumps outside of it and says, nope, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So that's been my experience as I've had the privilege of connecting with churches from across the country, is that, there's lots of stories I can share, but for folks who wanted to find a home, now being able to find a home, as James said, for churches, like entire churches that sort of lost their denominational affiliation or their association, finding community again, because for so long they were kind of pushed back from the table. They didn't have relationships and connection. Of course, it looks like LGBTQ followers and women who are called to lead, who haven't had the privilege to do that, those with disabilities, people of color, kind of those who've been pushed to the margins, typically within Canadian evangelicalism, kind of being brought to the center. And I think at the most beautiful part is that churches are finding this new, renewed sense of gospel and of justice again. And so I think, without getting into too many specifics, but I think those are some of the beautiful things that we see when we open this posture up and we allow the Spirit to move us along.
Nice. Awesome. You ready for my favorite story number 2?
I'm ready.
Okay, all right. It's a bit shorter, and it's just such a good, this is just the tableau of this, one of my favorite, and that was an unintended pun for anyone. Anyway, Jesus entered the temple, this is from Matthew 21, and began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, "The scriptures declare my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." Jesus' actions in the temple, they were both a condemnation of what we've made of worship, but they were also just a clearing of the way for new things to take shape. I think it is very easy for us to rail against the system and shake our fists at what's wrong with the church or what's wrong with how we've been raised and what we've known. There is a place for righteous anger. There is a place for flipping the tables to stop things. But I'm also very excited at what that clears the way for. When the tables are gone, when the tables are clear, there is some new stuff to be done and to take place. And so I wanted to ask Elle if you have any good stories of churches in the Good Table Network that are kind of creatively clearing the deck and trying new ways of being, right? Like who's flipping over what tables and what is being placed back on them? Yeah,
another great question. Here's what I'll say. I also really love this story because Jesus is not going to like the Roman palace, he's going to the temple. So it's sort of like there's courage for a church and for a group of people to take that prophetic gaze and turn it inwards kind of at ourselves, not just destroying something, but like you said, it's like an invitation to like holy renovation. That's often how I try to reframe deconstruction conversations. Yes, you're deconstructing, but it's also a holy opportunity to renovate. And so some of the things that I have seen that churches have been trying is decentering celebrity and charisma in favor of sort of shared leadership and co-pastor models, much like you guys here have done, which is very beautiful. So Elevation Church in Waterloo is a church that I love that's part of the Good Table, and that's another kind of group that's kind of changed the way that they have organized to try to create more shared governance. I think choosing slow relational ministry over the metrics of just attendance and giving. So I don't know if you've grown up in churches, sometimes it's numbers, that's all that matters, it's just the numbers. But I think there's a lot of churches that are trying to turn their minds toward becoming, rather than just a consumer of worship, but like a companion in formation. I think of the ways that some churches have had to confront the ways that money and branding and sometimes institutional self-preservation has sometimes replaced mercy and mission. So I think of a church in Toronto called Wellspring that's part of the Good Table, and they had a historic claim of clergy sexual abuse that occurred 20 years ago. It was proven true in a court of law, and the church had to navigate a really difficult situation and how they centered the victims and how they chose transparency in that process openly, even though it was a beloved former pastor. And they could have chosen the easy route to keep it quiet, keep it in-house, deal with it, but they said, no, I think this is actually an opportunity for the city of Toronto, because it did make the news, and the people that live in our neighborhood to see that this is actually what the gospel means, that we do this difficult work together, and that we love one another through difficulty, even though there was a claim of harm and it was true. I think about churches that are trying to lean into leadership that actually reflects the diversity of the kingdom. I've been in church my entire life, and I can't remember a time that I've ever seen a pastor in a wheelchair. Has anyone ever had a pastor that used a wheelchair? When someone brought it up to me, I thought, yeah, I have never seen. So there's a church that's part of the Good Table called Vox in Barrie, and one of their pastors is a person who uses a wheelchair. And their whole church has had to change to become more accessible, to create a ramp that goes up this, like all the little things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And so I think that's another beautiful way that we say, hey, leadership can reflect the diversity of the kingdom. I think about communities that are trying to organize around repair and justice, the practical things that happen in their neighborhoods. So there's a church that's part of the Good Table called Clarkson Community Church. They're in Clarkson, which is Mississauga, near Park Credit. And they've been rooted in the neighborhood for 20 plus years. They run a summer camp in the summer. Summer camp in the summer, makes sense. And it's accessible and affordable. You know, so many of us, when it gets warm outside, we think about leaving the city. But if you don't have the means to do that, you are in the city. And so they run a camp that's very accessible, that's affordable, run by volunteers and grants, and it's one of the most beautiful summer camps that you could ever want to go to, right in the city. And so there's just beautiful ways that their church has oriented their giving and their volunteer hours to serve others. And I think that's kind of beautiful. I think about some churches that are celebrating small things. intentionally. So there is a church in Hollydean in Victoria that's part of the Good Table. Dear friend of ours pastors there. 2 dear friends of ours pastor there. I got to be with them in June. They celebrated everything. I don't know that I've ever really been around. I was like, I need to up my joy game. And I thought I was a pretty joyful person, but they celebrated everything. They celebrated all the small things. Every little thing was celebrated, and that was part of their values and their culture. And I just thought that that was, a really beautiful thing. So there's lots of churches that I could think about, but those are a few stories that kind of came top of mind for me.
Awesome. Very exciting. We're going to spend some time fielding some questions from here soon, but I wanted to ask a couple questions first just to get things going on, kind of some of the nuts and bolts of how the Good Table is set up, some of its dreams for the future. So if I can, what I wanted to start with was the quote, shared values, because when you go to the Good Table's website, it's not a tab that says values, it says shared values. And it's very inspiring that your organization doesn't have values. It's the people that make up the organization share values. And I would just, could you tell me a bit more how like that came to be as a thing? What was the process? And just to keep the stories being told, like there's some justice stuff in there too. That's really cool. I'd love to hear some, if there's anything there. Yeah.
Yeah, so the story of the Good Table, it was an accident that it happened. It didn't mean to happen. We didn't set out to happen for it to happen. We had some conversations and people sort of said, I think this is actually something that we need. We want an association to belong to. We want relational connections. We want to get to know other people and other churches from across the country. So what that meant is that I'm only paid 1 day a week. That's it. That's the only money that flows. This is all a labor of love. It moves at the speed of life, and it means that it's all volunteers. So rather than go away in a room with a couple of people and dream up what we think this should become, we said, no, we're actually going to ask you, we're going to utilize something called the appreciative inquiry model, which is essentially you're just asking positive questions. What's the best of your faith formation and tradition? So if you grew up Christian Reformed, if you grew up Pentecostal, if you grew up Brethren, if you grew up, what's the gifts that tradition gave to you? The way that you did church, how you understand scripture, how you did community. There was plenty of things we could say we didn't want to do, and plenty of things we could say we didn't want to be about, but we wanted to take the model of saying, what's the gifts that are here in amongst these people? So a big group of people came together and shared what's the best of their traditions. And we went through a long discernment process. There were some theologians, some Canadian theologians part of that, pastors, Jesus followers, therapists, and we kind of came together and said, rather than doctrinal positions that we hold sort of with a clenched fist, what are postures that we could share together? What are things that we could say we agree upon? We can share these values together. We made these decisions together, and we're going to continue to make these decisions together in discernment, in group consensus building models. So the shared values was not one person that wrote a theological decree, like John Calvin or something. This was like a group of people that said, I think this is the best of our traditions, the best of what we've been offered as the body of Christ. So let's put that on paper and say, hey, what do you think? Could your church get on board with that? Could you get on board with that? Do you feel comfortable holding this posture together? So that's kind of how the shared values, and I was not a part of that. I was a bird on a wire looking over, like, what are these people doing? It was a beautiful thing to just trust the Spirit and trust the group of people that have gathered. Say, hey, what do we want to be about together? And that's where that document came from. We're pretty proud of it. Yeah. We read it, feel pretty good about it, because I can see the faces and the churches and the seminaries that document represents. So yeah, it really was a work of the people.
Yeah. So it's definitely worth this week checking out thegoodtable.ca, clicking about us. The values, I'll give you the bullet points. I love them. It's the others centered. So these are things that we value. They are as follows: the others centered, self-giving, life-transforming way of Jesus. That's number one. Number two, the openness of Christ's table. The openness of Christ's table. Number three, the dignity and worth of every person. Number four, peacemaking and power sharing. Peacemaking and power sharing. And number five, justice for the oppressed. There's a lot to dig into on all of that.
It's long-winded. We are long-winded people.
And that is very refreshing as well. There's a lot of moves to make everything very quickly digestible, and this is something, this is not an appetizer, this is a meal.
No,
I like
that's a
it.
whole buffet.
I like
That's
it.
a buffet,
I like it.
yeah.
Awesome. You just got your nonprofit status?
We did in
Yeah.
May. The government
Yes.
gave us a stamp of approval.
Yes.
We were nervous, but it went through and without a revision. So we felt pretty good about that.
So, like, just historically speaking, you've been working on this for how many years, roughly?
3 years.
About roughly 3
Yep,
years?
3 years.
About how many churches are roughly in the network right now? How many are in talks? Like, just
Yeah,
rough
no,
numbers,
that's
like,
fine. No, I have
give
the
some
numbers.
sense of size and scope.
I looked at the map. Yeah, we have 15 churches who have joined. We have one in discernment in London. You guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to let that out of the bag. One in Montreal, one in Saskatoon that's in discernment, and 2 in Vancouver. And then so we have 3 churches that have said yes in Victoria, and one that just came on board in Calgary.
Oh,
So
very fun.
we got it at Southwestern Ontario. So it is a wonderful place to be, but we're across the country now. So.
And you are pulling people into Southwestern Ontario for a retreat soon, yes?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, in a couple of weeks.
That's
so
exciting.
we decided that instead of part of my job is to convince people this is a good idea, and it's a gift, and I love to do that, and I could do this work forever. But now that people have said yes, the question was, and what are we going to do together? Now that we are around this table, what would we like to do? So rather than the board and myself, or just a few people kind of going away in a retreat and making up a strategic plan, we invited all of the churches who have said yes, their boards, people who are in discernment, and we are going to go through yet another appreciative inquiry model, where we will discern and decide together on the Monday prayer, break bread together, and say, what do we want to do? We're not making this up alone, we're doing this together, where do we want to go? So. They may not know it, but they're getting put to work. This is no retreat. This is a working group that's going to come together and decide what we'd like to do for the next couple of years. So we plan, God laughs, I know. We'll keep it loose, but we'll try our best to figure out where we want to go. So I'm really looking forward to it. And that'll be in Mississauga, and that's November 3rd and 4th?
Yeah.
Monday and Tuesday. Please pray for us. Pray for all the folks that are gathering. About 50 or 60 people have said yes. And so, please pray for them and pray that the Spirit moves and that we get a sense of where God would like us to go.
Perfect. So I'm going to pass the mic to Susan. If anybody has any questions for Elle, if you haven't picked up, I did give her some advance warning, but she's very good on her feet too. So feel free to,
I can tap dance with the best of them. Yeah.
So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I will come to you.
Is there a cost to join their affiliation?
Oh, the $1 million question.
Is it $1 million? It's $1 million.
That's it, my dog. This is being recorded. I know my board's going to want me to say yes. We would love if people could give a little bit to keep the work going, but there's no set price point. We know that some churches have extra money, some churches don't. We don't want to have money be a barrier for participation. So the answer is yes, please give generously. That would be lovely, but no, there's no technical financial requirement. Thanks for making me sweat on that one. I hate talking about money. It's the worst. It's the thanks.
It's the chair of our board.
Oh, it's the chair of the board. I know.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Steph.
Good morning. Are you guys now technically a denomination? or
Another sweaty question.
can you ordain people?
Yeah, great question. So when churches lose their, I call this the behind the scenes sausage making of church life. Sometimes you don't want to know what goes in to make it happen, but it is a thing. You have to worry about ordinations and licensing for marriages and charitable status and bylaws and all of that. So when churches lose their affiliation status, sometimes that also means their pastors lose their licensing to perform marriages. Surprisingly, at least it was for me, the government of Canada really cares about who performs marriages, and not for any theological or social reason. It's about money. So it actually takes quite a while as an association to apply to become what the government would understand to be a denomination. What we're going to do as part of our discernment process, as you can imagine, ordinations, or at least being called to be in pastoral ministry, for some people, I have a dear friend who is ordained with the Vineyard, and essentially it happened in a parking lot in Ottawa in the back trunk of a car. That's the gospel truth of a story. For others, it's a 4-year process, and you get a Master's of Divinity, and you go through an apprenticeship program. So depending on your tradition, that ordination process can look very, very different. So technically, the government is not going to allow us to do that for a couple of more years. As soon as they give us the green light, we will apply for that right away, because that will be a big help for ministers that need that. But in terms of an actual ordination process, we're going to actually discern that together and decide, hey, if we're going to be this thing, what do we want our pastors to agree on? Or what kind of ethics do we want to have, or accountability structure do we want? So the answer is yes, just not yet, but soon. Great question.
Hi, with today's atmosphere, is this just Canadian, or are you expanding into the States?
We are just elbows up here in Canada. I could go on a long time. That's a great question.
Yeah.
I've been a part of lots of conversations, and as you can imagine, I think about my bookshelf. I love reading, and a lot of my theology books, Christian living books, Bible studies, discipleship tools, they all come from America. God bless our brothers and sisters in the United States, but they're just not Canadian. I can feel it when I used to drive over the border. Within a second, I knew I was in a different country. And so we have no empire building aspirations to be anything but coast to coast and thoroughly Canadian. Yeah. It's just different. We're just different. And pastors and churches, it's different. There's many things we share in common, sure, Jesus, all that good stuff. But how we live out our faith and the context that we live it in, Canada's so beautiful. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else, but it is unique. And so I think a Canadian expression is what we should have. I'm one amongst and one submitted with the larger group, but I think we feel pretty strongly that we want to be elbows up. In a very non-violent way, elbows up. In a very peacemaking, peacekeeping kind of way.
Classic.
How do you determine which churches you want to be a part of the table?
Yeah. So at this point, it's kind of like an open invitation. If a church needs a denominational or associational home, we have a conversation with them. They reach out, they ask some questions, and we try to determine if they're a fit, which so far we haven't had anyone that wasn't. Essentially, if they can we're trying to honor the fierce autonomy of the local church. People already have local communities, they make decisions, they do that incredible work on their own. We don't want to get involved in that or become a top-down kind of over and above organization. So if we can get on board and do these shared values together, do life, build some consensus together, we haven't had to say no yet, and honestly, I don't know what we would do at this point, because so far it's been like a resounding welcome home. We're glad you're here, pull up a seat. So yeah, there's not a lot of criteria at this point, but I think for pastors and stuff, we might make a bit more of an accountability structure together, but that's a great question.
Bit of a challenging question.
Oh, I love them.
Given that the atmosphere in Canada and elsewhere, where churches are closing, they're failing for good reasons, etc., and you have people like yourselves and others trying to build things up, how do we stay relevant in our society given the gap in some ways between what we stand for and what we do and what's going on, and also at the same time trying to be more involved and inclusive in society to make it more open to people who would not necessarily be here? In 3 minutes.
That's a big question. It's a great question. There are a lot of there are a lot of churches that are closing across the country. We feel that when you look at the religious data that comes out from Stats Canada. Next time you get your census, please fill out the religious data. It's the only good metrics that we have to measure these things across the country. And so when you look at that data, it is on the decline. We can't deny that. It's every denomination, every theological tradition is experiencing that. I'll go on record by saying I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. And why that is because I think we're still living in a bit of a hangover from Christendom, if that makes sense, is that we kind of had a society and a world that sort of going to church was something that respectable people did, but it didn't necessarily mean that they were followers of Jesus. And so I think what we're experiencing, this sort of decline moment, it's okay. The Spirit is still at work. We grieve, we lament those people that used to be here that aren't anymore. I went to Bible college. There's a lot of people that I started in the ministry with who they aren't doing that work anymore, and they're not even sure where they're at with their faith. So I don't mean to say that those numbers don't matter, that people don't matter, but I do think that it's an opportunity for us as followers of the way of Jesus to see ourselves as not power over, but power with. How we serve our neighbors, how we love people, how we wash feet, not build empires. And I think that oftentimes the Canadian context, what flows up from America, sometimes hits our noses as well. And I just think that this is an awesome opportunity for the church to really be the church. And I understand that we can define that in many ways, and I have to answer this question quickly. But I do think that if we look at the model of the life of Jesus, and radical presence, local presence, being together, loving one another, those sound like really trite things, but they are hard to do. They are not easy things. And so that's my encouragement to churches, is that we may never be a gigantic presence across Canada anymore. We're not a voting bloc that can swing an election, and maybe that's not a bad thing. That would be my 3-minute elevator pitch.
Thanks for coming to talk with us today. The question I have is, if Hillside agrees and votes yes next week,
Yep.
how do you see the Good Table practically supporting Hillside in the work that we're doing?
Mm-hmm. So we had to start that's a great question. We had to start somewhere, so we chose to support pastors and leaders. That was kind of the first thing. Create belonging, community, connection for those who are in leadership, try to support the board. Some denominations have things like benefits and pension packages and things like that. We have no dream to navigate that. We'll partner with people to help do that work, and we do have some options already available. The next thing would be the question that I would love to put in front of churches like you is, what would you like? So this is kind of the joy of being a part of a startup, is that you kind of get to dream together. As a church here, what would you want? Would you want to hear about the churches in Victoria? Do you want to hear about the cool people in Vancouver? Do you want to hear what's happening in Montreal? How can we support you is really, what do you need? Because at this point, we could build that together. I tell James this, I mean this with my whole heart. I always feel a very lovely sense of the Spirit when I've been here. I said to James, it's good vibes. Feels like beautiful vibes. And so I know that there's beautiful things that you're doing here that would be an encouragement to another church. So I think even just practically, we could share stories across the country of the ways that you're seeing the presence of God here, the way you're following Jesus, the things that you guys are trying. I think the next question that we might be able to help one another solve is what resources are you using for discipleship? What's your kids' curriculum like? Kind of the practicalities of doing life together. What books are you reading in your book studies? What music are you singing in your churches? So I think being like a resource hub for one another across the country would be a really cool thing. So those are a couple of the things that we could offer right now, but it's not us as in a thing that's separate, it's us together. So what would you want to see and what would you want to offer? I'm throwing the shovel back to all these communities saying, dig with us. I don't know, let's try some things and see if it works. That's kind of the beauty of this moment.
Probably time for two more quick questions, and then we'll head into. Sound good?
That's great.
Yeah.
I can talk forever. So.
What's one of the things that you're most excited about the Good Table's going to be doing in the next couple of years? What excites you?
Yeah, this is all a bit of a dream. You know, I'm still living in a bit of a dream that this is even happening. So there's so many things that I'm excited about. I get to bear witness to a lot of difficult stories of sadness and of lament and of grief, and also things that kind of make my blood boil a little bit. And so I think there's something incredibly transformative to, as a 7 on the Enneagram, I like the happy stuff, that's my jam, but being able to walk through grief and difficulty and lament and come out the other side of it, I feel like you get to actually experience joy in a very deep, profound way, because you've opened yourself up to all the experiences. I wish that God worked in a different way, but there's always a gift in the wound. There's always a gift. And I wish it wasn't that way, because sometimes wounds really hurt. They change the trajectory of your life. So when I sit with people, I wouldn't say I'm looking for sad stories, but I have come to know that those sad stories, if we open ourselves up to the presence of the healing God, that something very beautiful can come out on the other end of it. So the thing I'm the most excited about is to see churches and people walk through difficulty and come out the other side different, more whole, healed, navigating the world in a different way, because I just think that's what it means to be a human being. I said this when I was here before, we don't have a pocket for sadness and a pocket for joy. That's not how our soul works. It's all mingled together. And so one of the things I'm most excited for is to just see the church become a place that just accepts lament and grief and difficulty and joy and hope and beauty and justice, and that this commingles in the beautiful tapestry of what it means to follow Jesus. So it's a very different answer I would have given a few years ago, but there is something beautiful walking through pain with people and churches who've experienced pain and difficulty and watching the joy that comes in the morning. So I'm really excited about that.
Great.
She's getting her steps in.
Hi, our church has gone through a lot, and we've lost people because we basically allow anybody to walk through our doors. Is there any set criteria in order to join? We are very inclusive of everybody. And I would hate to join an organization that didn't have the same outlook and views as us. I don't want to have a sister church that is totally against gay people. So, yes, we've lost people, but we've gained a lot of people. So, like I said, I don't want to have somebody that's very blinded. What's your view, and what's your organization's view?
We are birthed as an answer to that very problem. So the reason that these churches have found themselves denominationally homeless is because their stance on inclusion did get them kicked out. So within Canadian evangelicalism right now, that is sort of Canadian evangelicalism is being refounded on the answer to one question, and it is around human sexuality. And so these churches do find themselves without a home because of their stance. So I can make you a promise right now that churches who hold a non-inclusive view, they have a million other options for denominational affiliation and associations, and there's only one in Canada for those who are fully inclusive, and that's us. It might not be that way forever, but it is for right now. So the churches who have joined, those values, if you read the section on the website, if you get a chance, I know it's a lot of words, but they have to say yes to that. And this is just a conversation that it's settled in our mind. This is the way we want to follow Jesus as an organization. So yeah, you will be in partnership and in connection with not 100% like-minded on all the finer pieces of doctrine, but we're going to find unity and diversity. But the thing that we're going to hold in common is Jesus at the center. Everybody's welcome at the table. And so, yeah, that's a great question. And we wrestled with it for a long time. Are we going to say no to someone that would hold a different view? And the overwhelming answer was yes. Same with women in ministry. We understand there are people who view that women shouldn't be in ministry, there's a lot of other places where they can call home, and that's kind of a non-negotiable for us as well. So thank you for that question. It's really important.
Well, let's continue on. Let's gather around Christ's table. Let's head into communion. If you do have any further questions for Elle or for the leadership here, feel free to grab any one of us right after, and we can keep that conversation going. We plan on putting a one-pager together. I've got it like half drafted. I wanted to see what kind of questions came out before I finished it, so that'll be